Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Fortuna and welcome to my IPA 2020 clinic video. Unfortunately, we can't be in person to do this, but hopefully this video series can help you move forward in your percussion goals, specifically your snare drumming goals. Today we're going to be discussing some snare drumming extended studies. We're going to go over the 7/8 grid, a Swiss grid, and then some metric roll manipulation exercises and variations. So let's talk about the Swiss grid just a little bit. We have an 8-bar exercise. It's broken down into 4 separate breakdowns of the Swiss Army triplet and then 4 measures of check. They're just flam accents that you play at measures 1, 3, 5, and 7. Measures 2, 4, 6, and 8 are the measures that are the actual Swiss grid breakdown, right? And so they are just 4 beats of a Swiss variation that you can play, right? So there's 4 variations. The first one is measure 2. That is the actual just standard Swiss Army triplet, double on the right hand with a flam on that first note and a low grace note afterwards, right? The next variation is the flam still on that first note. You still have the double on the right hand. You just kick that left hand accent. So essentially you grid the accent and you move it, right? The third variation you have in measure 6 is the variation of a touchita, which is moving where the double happens. It's no longer on the right hand. You move the double to the left hand, and that's on the second and third partial of the triplet. The flam in front of the double note is key to what makes this a Swiss Army triplet. So that flam moves with the double, and then you are essentially just playing a touchita for measures 6. Measure 7 and 8, you play the check of that flam accent, and measure 8, you have the moving of the accent to now on the left hand double and a low first note with your right hand, right? So it's and you would repeat it to the beginning of the exercise, which is just a flam and an accent on that first note. Another variation you can do with this exercise is something that maybe some of you are familiar with, maybe some of you aren't. It's 4-2-1ing this exercise. So as it's written right now for you in front of you is its 4 version, which is 4 beats per each variation that we have, right? We discussed that. The next step would be to then add more measures to that and go to a 2-beat breakdown of each one, and then a 1-beat breakdown of each one, right? The 2-beat breakdown, you essentially just turn every 4/4 measure into a 2/4 measure, right? And so you have 2 beats of check flam accents, and then 2 beats of the actual Swiss Swiss Army triplet, and then 2 beats of flam accents, 2 beats of moving that accent to that left hand kick, and then so on and so forth for the rest of the exercise. After you do that, you go down to 1 beat per, which gets somewhat confusing as it starts getting into some more variations that you might not necessarily have gone over if you haven't done the entire exercise off the left hand. If you have gotten through the exercise with the left hand, then the 1 section of breaking this down 4-2-1 becomes slightly easier because you have already gone through some of those variations already, as opposed to just doing it off of the right hand and only feeling that first variation, second variation, third variation, fourth variation with 1 hand starting it. So next we have our metric rolls section. These 4 exercises are designed for you to really get a better sense of how to control different rhythms and putting them next to each other, seeing how accurate you can be making those rhythmic changes. So as you look through these variations, there's 4. You have triplets to 8th notes, you have 16th notes to triplets, you have triplets to 16th notes, and you have 8th notes to triplets. The goal for all of these exercises is 100% to be rhythmically accurate. In that regard, it's great, even when you're starting out, no matter what your level is, to take away all of the accents and diddles and make sure that you yourself as the player can just play the check of itself perfectly rhythmically accurate, and then start adding on those variables that are there to really start getting you to take the next step, right? So as you go through these exercises, know that as they're written, that is not its purest form. You can take away all of the added diddles and accents and really make this turn into a metric exercise in itself. Adding the rolls on top is what makes this go to that next level of achievement. The first variation of metric rolls that we have is metric rolls number 1. This deals with triplets going into 8th notes. So you have 4 beats of a triplet check with accents on the downbeats, and then you have a full measure of 8th notes with diddles that are low. Metric rolls number 2 deals with 16th notes going into triplets. So you have your 16th notes as your check with your accent on the downbeat, and then you have triplet rolls low, but as the next variation metrically. So you go from 16th notes, 4 beats per, triplets, low diddles. The next measure, you break it down into 2 beats per, next measure 1 beat per. Metric rolls number 3 is the same idea as metric rolls number 1 and 2. You're just essentially just taking the 2-1 version of it and foregoing the 4s version. So you're starting with 2 beats of triplet check with accents on the downbeats, and then you're going through 2 beats of 16th note roll, and then you break it down into 1 beat per. Metric rolls number 4 is our last variation that we have. It deals with 8th notes with accents and triplet rolls. The only difference between this exercise and the other ones is that the accent pattern itself is slightly varied in that it doesn't happen right on every downbeat, and that's what actually gives it its variation name, the Jeepers Creepers version, which if you were to sing the song, if you know the song, it goes somewhat with the accents and therefore gets its name Jeepers Creepers. So let's start out with the 7/8 grid. We have 4 bars of music, right, with a repeat, so it's an 8-bar total exercise. The first 2 bars are in the 3/4 pattern of 8th notes in 7/8, so that's 3 8th notes followed by 4 8th notes. And then the second 2 measures are the opposite, 4 8th notes followed by 3 8th notes. So you have a 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 1, and then you repeat it, right? So as you go through this exercise, each variation that you start adding to the exercise goes to the groupings of 4 notes, right? So the check of the first 3, 1 2 3, accent on that first partial followed by 2 low notes, that stays throughout the entire exercise. So no matter what you're doing in terms of variation to this exercise, those groupings of 3 notes stays the same the whole time, and what you're really manipulating is that grouping of 4. I'm going to do these exercises all at 72 beats per minute with the 8th note on. Feel free to work through this grid faster, slower. It'd probably be smart for everyone to start just a little bit slower so that you can really feel the way the pattern works, and then how you introduce the different variations and rudiments to that pattern itself. As soon as you start getting more and more comfortable with that tempo, just like anything else, start slowly increasing it, being mindful that your goal is to be as rhythmically accurate as possible and trying to achieve the certain variation on those groupings of 4 notes. The first variation we'll talk about here is the drag variation of the 7/8 grid. There are 4 different variations to this one, and as you can guess, each one happens on the 4 different partials of the 8th notes that we're trying to manipulate. So in the groupings of 4, the first variation, you have an accent on it that stays constant that whole time. You start adding a diddle to it. You'll accent on that first partial. The next variation would be an accent still on that first partial, but you're putting a diddle on the second partial only, so essentially creating a tap drag, and then on the third and fourth, right? Those are the first 4 variations of the drag 7/8 grid. as you move through the variations, you start adding more diddles, so you get the more 5-stroke or 2 drag variations. So that encompasses downbeat drags, and then you have different manipulations of 2 drags within the 4 notes that we're dealing with here in the grid. The very last thing that we have before we start moving to different rhythms themselves is the paradiddle variation, which is just it seems easy, but it's difficult in that you start getting different hands playing some accents that you normally haven't. So in the grouping of 4, the sticking is no longer right left right left. You get right left right rights, or left right left lefts, and that will be the variation that you're trying to achieve, all while maintaining that 8th note pulse. The next 3 variations deal with 16th notes. You have 3 different variations. You have the Herta variation, right, left, right, left. You have the single 9 variation, which just hand to hand across those 8 16th notes. And then you have the paradiddle variation, which is the same 8 16th notes, right, left, left, sticking. The next 7 variations all switch to a triplet feel. The triplet feel in 7/8 is a little odd, but once you get the hang of those triplets, it becomes a little bit easier. The single triplet variation, which is the first one right after the paradiddle variations in 16th note form, that's the variation that you should spend the most time on, just simply to get the rhythm that you're trying to achieve there, right? So it's 6 notes in the space of the 4 notes that you were playing originally. This is the first one that really starts manipulating the rhythmic feel of this 7/8 grid, and it poses a challenge sometimes if you don't really understand how that rhythm works with the metronome. The last half of the variations all deal with flams and then some more hybrid rudiments that you would see more typically in some of your book. So as you get through these patterns towards the end, the difficulty level does increase, especially as you get towards the more hybrid second to last and third to last lines. Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. I had a great time teaching and drumming with you. I hope that you did as well. Maybe you learned a thing or two. The biggest takeaway is that you can never stop learning about percussion. I never stop learning about it. Every day I learn something new, especially from my colleagues that you can see on these video series. They have so much knowledge to give you, and they want to give it to you. So again, thank you for joining me. I had a blast, and hopefully the next time I see you will be in person.